Masam Jimmy Jiro, Bare, Jema, Yemenga, Nagengo, Soso, Rari, Yeshiji, Desun Jeve, Yon La Shazen, Lo. Teada, Gade, Baranga, Para, Sanga, Buddhi, so, Teada, Gade, Para, Sanga, Buddhi, so, Teada, Gade, Para, Sanga, Buddhi, so, Yendu, was on Kishin, Yishi, Tola Papa, Jana, Lange, Yen, the Rosa, Gada, Yanda, Dembedono, Namokan, and also this. Yendu Janjo, Sembe, Saja, Sanji, Yum, the La Chaza, Law. Kage, Tension, Jojo, Gawameva, Jemeva, Chabameva, Dameva, Wandrum. Tate, Jimmy, Jabani, Shidembo, Soba, Sanje, Manam, Damba, the La Chaza, Law. 관계 두세년선에 다가도 저번 배신에 배신에 된 집에 과담달라 차차로 다들이 가서 다
gratitude. What happened? Hello. So yesterday I gave some kind of an introduction to the teaching of the Buddha and Dharma in general, and today we'll go through the texts by Master Nagarjuna, the precious Garland. Buddhism first originated in India, and then Takshashila and Nalanda and Vikramalashila became institutions of Sangha, monastic institutions, and therefore the Buddhism developed further and further. And so Master Nagarjuna, who was the crowning jewel of the Nalanda monastic institution, so as the Chinese disciples recited this praise, one verse praise which says, may all the three poisons be dispelled. So all religious traditions teach that we should restrain ourselves, harming others, being overpowered by the destructive emotions. So, unlike the theistic religions, which believe in a creator God, in Buddhism, all our misfortunes and suffering come from undisciplined mind. So they do not come from some kind of intention or the will of a God, a creator. And so there is the rejection of creation from some kind of a permanent, unchanging being. And things come from causes and conditions, and these conditions are not static, and therefore it is said that the condition is impermanent. And what kind of results you can expect comes from causes which are concordant to these results. And therefore, the third condition is called the potential condition. So, of course, the very nature of mind is luminous and awareness. Though that is the basic nature of the mind, there is this clarity and awareness as its characteristics, And therefore, objects can appear to it, and this mind or consciousness can cognize objects. So something that is aware of or cognizes an object is called consciousness. So in its intrinsic nature, the mind is not polluted by the destructive emotions. But still, our consciousness, our mind, is polluted by our destructive emotions. And there's no beginning to the mind. But because of these deluded states of mind which have covered our mind so far, since time beginningless, and all the different wrong thoughts and so forth arise in us because of our three poisons. Therefore, we pray that may the three poisons be eliminated. And so this cannot be done merely through prayer, but what we should do is to generate or cultivate wisdom. And therefore, you say in your prayer, may the wisdom lights be ablaze. And so, this wisdom, as it increases in its intensity and its comprehension of things, and for that we should actually cultivate single-pointed concentration, and that in turn has to be based on discipline or practice of morality and ethics. And so, with the aim of overcoming our destructive emotions, we are practicing the three trainings of morality, concentration, and wisdom to attain that of arhatship. And apart from that, in your prayer, you say, may I engage in the practices of bodhisattvas. And so your practice of three trainings must be complemented by this bodhicitta, the spirit of the altruistic spirit of enlightenment. So, for this light of wisdom to grow within oneself and develop further and further, one needs to put effort. And so you need to use your intelligence, which actually in order for this to single-pointedly focus on the object that you are trying to gain insight into, you need to have single-pointed concentration. And for that, you need to get rid of the obstacles to building or developing single-pointed concentration, which is done through the practice of morality. And within this practice of morality, you have those of mindfulness and introspection. And so, with mindfulness, you don't forget your object, and with introspection, you check whether your mind is going astray or not. And therefore, this is the practice which is taught in the Pratimoksha monastic discipline. And therefore, on the basis of ethics, you build single-pointed concentration, and on the based on that, you build that of the wisdom. So the essence of what we pray is said in this text. If for oneself and others, for oneself and others, one wishes to reach that of the highest enlightenment, one should cultivate those of the wisdom of non-duality and so forth, and the compassion and that of the awakening mind. So a Buddha is someone who has overcome all shortcomings and defects and has reached a state whereby he is able to see everything in one instant. So the root of this, the highest enlightenment is compassion, as it says in the text. And for that, and bodhicitta you should have the intention and the determination to reach the highest enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, so that you may be able to lead them to that same state of enlightenment. So one needs to, when we talk about enlightenment, Buddhahood, we need to understand that it is something that is possible for oneself to attain it. And therefore, with wisdom, you focus your mind on that end of enlightenment. And so, to overcome all our defilements, we need to have wisdom, which is the actual antidote or counterforce to all these different defilements that are within. And so you need to develop compassion, non-dual wisdom, and the compassion. So, with regard to the teaching of the Buddha, we aim to reach that of enlightenment, which comprise the twofold Buddha bodies, which are the wisdom of Dharmakaya and the Rupakaya. And Dharmakaya arises through the practice of collection of merit and wisdom, and then Rupakaya through the collection of wisdom, merit, sorry. And so these are called the two excellent Buddha bodies. And so in order for one to be able to attain these two, one needs to actually collect or accumulate the merit and wisdom. And so through wisdom, one attains that of the Dharmakaya. And without attaining Dharmakaya, there's no way a Buddha could actually manifest in some physical form to help others. And therefore, one should attain both of these, Dharmakaya and Rupakaya, through the collections of merit and wisdom. So the essence of Dharma is twofold: bodhicitta and the wisdom of emptiness, or the view of emptiness. So through these practice, of course, you will at some point reach this goal of enlightenment. But even on a daily basis, these two are very, very beneficial. So as Bodhicharyavatara says, all suffering in the world comes from selfishness. All happiness and joy in the world comes from wishing others to be happy. What need is there to say more? Look at the difference between the Tathagata Buddhas and the childish. And so this altruistic mind of enlightenment will bring true happiness to oneself and others. If you remain selfish, you will have suffering. Therefore, because of this, even in this life, the more you are dedicated for the welfare of others, you will be happier. the more you disregard others, ignore others, and remain selfish, you will have all kinds of misfortunes. As Bodhicharya Avatara says, if you do not exchange your happiness with the suffering of others, leave alone Buddhahood, reaching Buddhahood, even in samsara you will have no happiness. Therefore, reduce this selfishness, its intensity and strength, and see the reason for cherishing others over oneself. And so this is reasonable and has logical support. So because of our selfishness, we remain narrow-minded and short-sighted. And therefore, what Master Chandideva says, just this verse that I quoted earlier, is true. If you think through, all 7 billion people on this earth are equal in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. But we, the human beings, create problems. So if the elderly people could actually become younger to the age of 5 or 6, maybe there will be not much problem created by them. So the children are very innocent. So of course they may tell lies in order to get some gifts, but they do not go as far as causing suffering to others. As we grow up, however, as we grow up, we become more and more cunning. And so today, if you look at the world, all these different conflicts, the big ones such as the battles and wars, are because of our selfishness. So if you look at history, war is something that belongs to the feudal system, I say. The feudalistic society, and there were kings and lords, ministers and so forth, and when someone is against them, criticize them, they actually go to kill them. So all the soldiers in the army cherish their own life, but because of some command from the higher authorities, they are sent to kill others in wars. So war is related to feudal system. So whether it's king or religious leaders, when they remain selfish, then they actually make this distinction or discriminate others and us. So from wars between nations and peoples and so forth, down to being dishonest, deception, deceiving others and so forth, are because of our selfishness. So the antidote to that is cherishing others over oneself. All sentient beings do not want suffering, but want happiness. They are equal in that respect. So as we say in the 4 immeasurable prayers, may all sentient beings have happiness, and may all sentient beings may not have no suffering, and so forth. And so we are thinking of all sentient beings. When we think about them all, these sentient beings, then in your daily life you should be able to reduce your negative actions against others, harming others, bullying others and so forth. And therefore, unless you exchange your happiness and joy with the suffering of others, there is no happiness in samsara. As your strength of your bodhicitta increases, then as Bodhicharya Avatara says, which intelligent person would feel despair to ride the horse of bodhicitta, which leads one from bliss to bliss? And so when you gain conviction in this kind of practice of bodhicitta that brings happiness to yourself in the immediate sense, and as you become happier, your health also becomes better, and you'll be friends with the rest of the community that you live in, and therefore you create the causes for higher rebirth on a daily basis through the practice of bodhicitta, and that will increase by days, weeks, months, years. So if you can practice not harming others, but helping others in this life, your entire life, then there is no doubt that you will have a higher rebirth. And therefore, bodhicitta leads one from the higher state to through the higher and higher states. So when I sneeze, I usually say that those people who are sleepy, I'm actually waking you up. So which intelligent or sensible person would be discouraged to ride this horse of bodhicitta? As Shantideva says, just like the great elements, such as earth and so forth, may I be a sustenance for the immeasurable in number of sentient beings. So your life should be dedicated for the benefit of others. So if you can do that, then your life would, you would have a meaningful life, life after life. So may I be an eternal source of sustenance for the immeasurable, inconceivable number of sentient beings, just like the great elements like space. And therefore, you'll be able to actually make the determination that as long as space remains, as long as sentient beings remain, may I too abide to dispel the suffering of the transmigrators. So this would be a true prayer. So for yourself, you should cultivate bodhicitta, and for the benefit of others too. And so, until the end of space, you should have the determination that your only thing that you can do is to dedicate yourself for the benefit of others, to work for others. And this will give you the courage and the inner strength. So therefore, cultivating bodhicitta is very important and essential. And this is supported also by the wisdom of emptiness. And so, with regard to these practices, in India, the Buddha taught the first teaching on the Four Noble Truths, where he said, this is the true suffering, this is true origin of suffering, and this is true cessation, and this is the true path. And then during this first sermon, the Buddha taught the selflessness of persons. So whether it's the Pali tradition or the Sanskrit tradition, the Buddha has taught that of selflessness of persons. And then in the perfection of wisdom, scripture, on top of the selflessness of persons, the Buddha also has taught that of selflessness of phenomena. And not only the person is without any independent self, but even the aggregates, the psychophysical aggregates, are empty of any inherent existence. And so in the Heart Sutra we find mention these 5 aggregates too should be seen as being empty of intrinsic existence. So what that shows is the Buddha was indicating that in the first sermon he has taught the selflessness of persons. And here, in the Perfection of Wisdom teachings, he's saying that not only the person, but even the aggregates are empty of any inherent existence. That he has also taught that of the selflessness of phenomena, and also that not only the person, but even the aggregates are empty of inherent existence. As Master Nagarjuna says, as long as there is grasping at aggregates, to that extent there is grasping at a self. And so, as long as you grasp at some kind of a true existence, independent existence of the aggregates, you'll have the grasping at self of a person. And so, the main basis of designation of a person is the consciousness. So the Chittamatras actually identified a person, the true identity of a person as that of the Alaya Vijnana, the foundational consciousness. And then the one subsect of the Madhyamakas also assert that of the sixth consciousness as being the identity of the person. So they are actually thinking that, of course, we cannot posit the body and the other aggregates as being the person, but this consciousness can still be asserted as being the person's identity. And because we grow attachment, anger, and so forth, on the basis of the objects that we see, and therefore, in order to by saying that there is no external things that exist, it can somehow maybe help to reduce our attachment and so forth. So our mental pain and pleasure, so the Chittamatras still hold on to the mind as having some real existence, although the external things are rejected. But that will also lead to have some kind of a grasping at the consciousness as well. And so in order to do away with this grasping even at the mind or consciousness, then we have the Madhyamaka philosophical view. And so depending on their profundity of their wisdom and also the sharpness of their wisdom, there is the Madhyamakas who say that things are merely designated, that there's nothing which has any intrinsic, inherent existence in and of themselves. Whereas Savatantrika Madhyamakas do assert some form of objective existence. So Svatantra has the same meaning as independent. And so things still are asserted to have some kind of objective existence by them. So they say that things, just as they appear, they do exist in that way, and therefore we should not analyze that. This is what the Savatantrika Madhyamaka says. So they say that the object to be negated to actually demonstrate the truth of emptiness is that things have some kind of an objective independent existence without relying on or depending on the cognition. So because they still hold on to some kind of objective existence in things, they are not able to make that much kind of a breakthrough in realizing emptiness. Whereas, as Master Chandrakirti says, So in his Madhyamaka Avatara, so he mentions very clearly that we cannot assert any form of objective existence in anything, whether things external or internal, because then there would be logical fallacies. There are 4 different logical fallacies that are actually brought to against those who assert objective existence in things. And so if you think along these lines, I mean, we can actually find great admiration in the teachings of the Indian masters. And I usually say that most of the Nalanda masters were from South India, and so I say to people that the South Indian brain is very special. So these Nalanda masters were really brilliant. So Master Nagarjuna, based on the Prajnaparamita Sutras, which teaches things such as there's no form, no smell, and so forth. And of course, they have their scriptural sources, but mainly they use reason and logic. As the Buddha has said, all the 3 realms of existence is mere mind, or mere mind. And so, also in the Sandhi-Nimochana Sutra, which is part of the 3rd turning of the wheel of Dharma, I mean, there are different interpretations, of course. So there are different teachings the Buddha has taught. But we need to make distinction between what is definitive and what is provisional. And so within the 3rd turning, in the Sandhi-Nimochana Sutra, for example, which is part of the 3rd turning of Wheel of Dharma, it says that the first 2 turnings of the Wheel of Dharma are provisional, whereas the 3rd turning, which is the Sandhi-Nimochana Sutra itself, is definitive teaching. But when we use logic as part of the 3rd turning of the Wheel of Dharma, there is also the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, and then the Tathagata Garbha Sutra. These are parts of the 3rd turning of the Wheel of Dharma, which teach when we talks about selflessness, they emphasize on the clear light or luminous state of the mind. So I have actually read these texts. So I usually say that the 2nd turning of the Wheel of Dharma, the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, teach the object clear light, which is that of emptiness. And the 3rd turning of the Wheel of Dharma, which is Tathagata Garbha Sutra and the others, teach the subjective mind, clear light. So just as you climb a mountain, starting from the bottom of the mountain and go uphill, likewise, the teaching of the Buddha, the 3 turnings of the Wheel of Dharma, also lead you from the bottom up with the teaching of the 4 Noble Truths, and then you go into those teachings of the perfection of wisdom, and then the 3rd turning of the Wheel of Dharma, which teach this luminous clear light mind, the subjective clear light, not this kind of a gross state of mind that we have now, but a subtle mind. He's asking about Jonang Abbot. I usually tell him So the Shentong, that is the extrinsic emptiness taught in the Chonang tradition, is actually based on the clear light mind, which is the highest form. The final clear light mind is taught in the highest Yoga Tantra. So within the teaching of the highest Yoga Tantra, for example, the Samaja Tantra teaches the 4 empty states. And these 4 empty states are actually Shentong, extrinsic emptiness. Whereas that subjective mind, what it cognizes is the emptiness. And that emptiness is the intrinsic emptiness, or self-emptiness. So if you are able to actually bring these teachings together or relate to one another, you'll see the significance. As the Buddha, right after his enlightenment, said, I have found this nectar-like Dharma, which is profound, peaceful, unfabricated, clear light, and unconditioned. And so the profundity and peacefulness refers to the first teaching of the Buddha, and then non-fabrication or lack of fabrication refers to the second turning, and then the luminosity and unconditioned refers to the third turning of the wheel of Dharma. And so maybe I should limit myself to that much. So the main teaching is the practice of bodhicitta and the view of emptiness. So with regard to the 6 collections of reasoning written by Master Nagarjuna, who was known as the second teacher of this tradition, Buddhism, so this text, the Precious Garland, is also known as the text demonstrating the conventionality of things, and this was actually written as an instruction or an exhortation to the king. So it also deals with how, what kind of qualities his ministers and staff also should qualify. So in the Sanskrit, in the Indian language, the title is Rajaparikatha Ratnavali, and so because we have these texts translated from this Indian languages, therefore in the beginning of the text there is the title in Indian language, and then the Tibetan. And then Homage to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas was written by the translator in order to eliminate obstacles to this project of translating the text. Freed from all defects, adorned with all good qualities, the sole friend of all beings, I bow down to the omniscient one. As I said already, the Buddha, Sangye in Tibetan, means that all the shortcomings and defects have been eliminated. That means that they have not gone away just like that, but by applying the antidote to these, all the faults have been eliminated, and then all the good qualities are possessed by the Buddhas, and therefore, because all the defects and faults and shortcomings, defilements have been overcome, therefore the mind's potential to realize everything has become manifest, fully manifested. So, of course, with the help of bodhicitta, one should reach that of Buddhahood, not only with the wisdom of emptiness, which is, of course, wisdom of emptiness can lead one to arhatship. And so one should actually cultivate this wisdom of emptiness, which possess all aspects. O King, I will explain the practices solely virtuous to generate in you the doctrine, for the practices will be established in a vessel of excellent doctrine, in one who first practices the highest status and so forth. So this omniscient state, which has all the qualities and has overcome all, is a state in which the Buddha has overcome all defilements, all defects, which the Buddha has attained, the same kind of state, of course. The Buddha also gave wishes for all sentient beings to attain the same goal. So the very reason why the Buddha pursued to become enlightened, fully enlightened, is in order to help others. And therefore, having become enlightened, the only thing they work for is to enlighten others. Not only overcoming the afflictive mental afflictions, but also those of the cognitive obscurations. And therefore, the Buddha leads and shows the path to that enlightenment to others. In order to be able to do that, in order to be able to lead others to that state of enlightenment, the disciples or the followers should attain a high status. And therefore, that high status has to be qualified with the 10 resources and 8 leisurely states. In one who first practices high status, definite goodness arises later. For having attained high status, one comes gradually to definite goodness. So, in order to be able to attain a high status, which means a higher rebirth, life after life, one should practice the bodhicitta and the view of emptiness and so forth. So therefore, it says, for having attained high status, and in one who first practices high status, definite goodness arises later. For having, so the next 2 lines give the reason for that. And high status is considered to be happiness. Definite goodness is liberation. The quintessence of their means is briefly faith and wisdom. And so the faith here has also to be a faith which is generated by wisdom. Due to having faith, one relies on the practices. Due to having wisdom, one truly knows of these 2, wisdom is the chief. Faith is its prerequisite. So one who does not neglect the practices through desire, hatred, fear, or bewilderment is known as one of faith, a superior vessel for definite goodness. So one proceeds into the practice without desire or attachment or hatred or fear, and then confusion or bewilderment. So one should not proceed along the path with these 4 factors, desire, hatred, fear, or bewilderment, but with understanding. By understanding the teaching through reason, one should proceed with the practice. A superior vessel for definite goodness. Having analyzed well all deeds of body, speech, and mind, those who realize what benefits self and others, and always perform these are wise. So in other words, your body, speech, and mind, and primarily your mind, because we are so used to wrong thinking, all kinds of faulty thinking. And therefore, the verbal actions ensue that we accumulate ensue. the unwholesome actions. And so, in other words, the actions that ensue from our mental afflictions are the causes for samsara. So a superior vessel for definite goodness means that one should think through reason and proceed along the practice with the help of wisdom and gaining understanding through using one's intelligence. Those who realize what benefits self and others and always perform these are wise. And so there are 16 factors which would lead one to higher rebirth. So avoiding the 10 non-virtuous actions, and on top of that the 6 more, which are not drinking, intoxicants or alcohol, a good livelihood, non-harming, respectful giving, which is on verse 10, honoring the honorable. So of course we give gifts and alms to beggars, but many times what we do is we actually look down upon the beggars. But that should not be how we give to others, these beggars, but give respectfully. So honoring the honorable and love practice, in brief, is that. So not killing, verse number 8, going back there. Not killing, not stealing, forsaking the mates of others, refraining completely from false, divisive, harsh, and senseless speech, thoroughly forsaking covetousness, harmful intent, and the view of nihilists. These are the 10 gleaming paths of action. Their opposite are dark. And then verse number 10. So these are the 10 non-virtuous actions. On top of that, then the other 6 factors for higher rebirth are not taking alcohol. So regarding this, my late senior tutor, Leung Rinpoche, had told me a story. One elderly Tibetan man received the 5 Upasaka vows from him. And when Yongdzin Rinpoche explained about not taking alcohol as part of his vow, layperson's vow, the elderly man said that to Yongdzin Rinpoche that he cannot give up drinking alcohol. And then very kindly, Yongdzin Rinpoche told him that if you cannot give up alcohol, just don't take alcohol to the point of getting drunk, but just take a little bit. So I also say that when you, during your meal time, you may take some alcohol, and also during parties, if you're not able to give up drinking alcohol. So you, of course, gather at a party very happily, but when you actually go out of that party, away from the party, you should also be happy. And so don't take alcohol to the point of getting drunk. And then a good livelihood, which means not being tainted by the wrong livelihood, and then non-harming. So, of course, there is no harming as part of the 10 non-virtuous actions. But here, intentionally causing harm to others is what is referred to by non-harming. And then respectful giving, and honoring the honorable, and love. So these are the 16 factors which leads one, or the cause for higher rebirth, as in Master Aryadeva's 400 verses. get rid of the non-meritorious actions first, in the middle get rid of the notion of his self, and in the end get rid of all distorted views. And one who's able to do these is wise. And so the first line refers to the overcoming the causes of lower rebirth. And then the second line, which says overcoming the notion of a self. And so one should actually be aware of how one actually conceives an independent self and a truly existing or independent self. So as Master Chan Tsongkhapa says, what is dependent on conditions, they are devoid of any intrinsic existence. So what more amazing teaching than this one could find? As Master Nagarjuna says, what is said to be what arises through dependence is said to be empty, and that is said to be designated, and that is the middle way. And so when we talk about dependent arising or dependent origination, what it shows is that things are dependent on others. So dependence means that there is nothing which does not depend on others. And origination means that they lack any intrinsic existence. So dependence shows that of emptiness, and origination that of conventional reality. So things do not exist the way they appear to, how they appear to our mind, but that doesn't mean that they are not existent. And so this wisdom of emptiness also must be complemented by that of bodhicitta. As the Guru Puja says, talks about that of equaling, exchanging self and others. So of course selfishness is not the root of all mental afflictions, but it actually helps one to, causes one to have exaggerated outlook. And therefore, one should see that self-cherishing attitude is totally bad. So however profound understanding and insight into the emptiness one may have, if you remain selfish, you may reach that of the you will not reach the omniscient state of Buddhahood. And therefore, in order to reach that goal of Buddhahood, you should combine this wisdom of emptiness with the bodhicitta. And therefore, the final verse, the line in the verse from the 400 verses refers to that. In the end, get rid of all the distorted views. And one who is able to do that is wise. And so, the wisdom of emptiness, one should, to the best of one's ability, contemplate on it. So, of course, we have the sense of an I on a daily basis, every moment. But when you actually check within yourself, where is this I? Who is it? You may have to scratch your head. Not being able to find the self. as you have thought it to be there. Because we think of things that we utilize and the utilizer, the self, but where are they? As I was reading the elucidation of the intention, the commentary by Master Tsongkhapa on Madhyamaka Avatara, where he says that the self cannot be found from amongst the aggregates. So, and then he says that it's merely designated on the basis of these aggregates, the 5 psychophysical aggregates. At that point, I had some kind of an experience of a lightning bolt striking me. So at that point, I realized I actually had this thought that, oh, that I do not exist. But later I found that that was a gross understanding or insight into selflessness. And therefore, it is very important to actually reject any intrinsic or inherent existence of these psychophysical aggregates. And so this is it's very clear that this must be cultivated. So now it's about 10:30. So I'll take my tea. So practice in brief is that, verse number 11, practice is not done by just modifying the body, for one has not forsaken enduring others and is not helping others. So practicing penitence, physical penitence, going through physical hardships is not the means to overcome harming others. Those not esteeming the great path of excellent doctrine, bride with giving, ethics, and patience, afflict their bodies, taking an apparent path like a cow path, deceiving oneself and those following. So whatever action you do, if you see the fault of it, so what are the faults of the 10 non-virtuous actions? Their bodies embraced by the vicious snakes of the afflictive emotions, they enter for a long time, the dreadful jungle of cyclic existence among the trees of endless beings. A short life comes through killing, much suffering comes through harming, poor resources through stealing, enemies through adultery, from lying arises slander, from divisiveness, a parting of friends, from harshness, hearing the unpleasant, from senselessness, one's speech is not respected, covetousness destroys one's wishes, harmful intent yields fright, wrong views lead to bad views, and drinking to confusion of the mind. Through not giving, giving comes poverty. Through the wrong livelihood, deception. Through arrogance, a bad lineage. Through jealousy, little beauty. A bad color comes through. Complexion comes through anger, stupidity from not questioning the wise. These are the effects for humans, but prior to all is bad times migration. Opposite to the well-known fruits of these non-virtues is arising of effects caused by all the virtues, desire, hatred, ignorance, and the actions they generate are non-virtues, non-desire, non-hatred, non-ignorance, and the actions they generate are virtues. From non-virtues comes all suffering, and likewise, all bad transmigrations. From virtues, all happy transmigrations, and the pleasures of all lives, desisting from all non-virtues and always engaging virtues with body, speech, and mind. These are called 3 forms of practice. Through these practices, one is freed from becoming a hell being, a hungry ghost, or animal. Reborn as a human being, human or God, one gains extensive happiness, fortune, and dominion. Through the concentration in immeasurables and formlessness, one experiences the bliss of Brahma and so forth. Thus, in brief, are the practices for higher status and their fruits. The doctrine of definite goodness. So as I said yesterday, this chapter teaches the higher rebirth and the definitive goodness, or the highest goodness. The doctrines of different goodness are said by the conquerors to be deep, subtle, and frightening to the childish who are not learned. I am not, I will not be, I have not, I will not have. These that frightens all the childish and extinguishes fear in the wise. By him who speaks only to help beings, it was said that all beings have arisen from the conception of I and are enveloped by the conception of mine. The I exists, the mine exists. These are wrong as ultimates. For the two are not established by a thorough consciousness of reality just as it is. The mental and physical aggregates arise from the conception of I, which is false. In fact, how could what is grown from false seed be true? So what gives us some determination and inner strength is that these virtuous thoughts and actions have support of logic and the valid cognition, the right knowledge, whereas the wrong actions are based on wrong thoughts, wrong cognition. But because of our habituation with the wrong cognition, wrong thoughts, we tend to commit wrong things. But if we are able to use our intelligence, this wisdom and intelligence that we have, we'll be able to actually counter them. And so the good actions, the positive actions, always have the support of reason that can establish and demonstrate their truth. So the antidote to these wrong states of mind, because they have the support of logic and reasoning and valid cognition, they can be increased further and further, infinitely. And so attachment, anger, and so forth can be reduced if you think through. Whereas compassion, love, and so forth can actually grow further and further. Just as it is said, that an image of one's face is seen depending on a mirror but does not really exist as a face. So the conception of I exists dependent on the aggregates, but like the image of one's face, that I does not at all really exist. Just as without depending on a mirror, the image of one's face is not seen, so too the conception of I does not exist without depending on the aggregates. When the superior Ananda heard what this means, he attained the eye of doctrine and repeatedly spoke of it to monastics. As long as the aggregates are conceived, so this is what His Holiness was earlier quoting, as long as there's a conception of aggregates to that extent, so long thereby does the conception of I exist. Further, when the conception of I exists, there is action, and from there is also the birth. With these three pathways mutually causing each other without a beginning, a middle, or end, this wheel of cyclic existence turns like the wheel of a firebrand. Because this wheel is not obtained from self, other, from both, in the past, present, or future, the conception of I is overcome, and thereby action and rebirth. So in short, so we do not reason out why we want happiness and not suffering. It is something that is intrinsically something that we wish for. Whereas pain and pleasure do not come from without any cause, nor do they come from permanent causes, unchanging causes, but they come from causes that are impermanent and changing. And therefore, a state of mind which no sooner it arises causes us to lose our peace of mind, such as attachment, anger, and so forth, because they see the objects that they focus on wrongly because of exaggerated outlook. And therefore, in order to overcome attachment, anger, and so forth, one should, of course, cultivate bodhicitta, but the main antidote or counterforce is the wisdom of emptiness. And so we'll do the rest of the first chapter tomorrow. So there is a blessing, jenang, of the great knowledge queen of peacock deity tomorrow, which seems to be a prevalent practice in Chinese, amongst the Chinese people. So of course it comes within the tantric teaching, and of course there is also the practice of bodhicitta in the beginning of the blessing, and we'll do the bodhicitta ceremony. So tomorrow. So we'll stop here for today. Thank you.